All right. Hey, Henry. Hey, Rick. Hey, Tracy. How's everybody doing?
Michael, you're great.
Good. Welcome aboard. So, does anyone have a deal to review? Is the best question.
Well, Henry and I looked at a deal. We don't not necessarily want to do a full deal review, but we were looking at the market. Um, had it was pretty interesting. So the deal is it's in Kentucky. Got kind of excited. It fit right in our buy box. It was a good first park, probably. Um, we think so. It's 22 pads, right in our price range. The current lot rent was 280 a month. And of course, first thing I did, jumped on HUD's website, right? And that's at $500. So of course, that was cause for excitement. Um, but then we kind of looked under the hood a little bit more, and $500 in that market felt pretty high. So then from there, Um, I requested some more information from the broker. He had his underwriting at $400 for the max market rent. So there's a big difference there. I called a few parks. Called one park that was 265 a month. Another park was $300 a month. And then it really helped to do it was actually the first time I've done it. Did your market rent study, and that came up to 343 a month. So it was just really interesting how, tried to look at several different data points, and there were some big differences in what we were looking at. Um, so I don't know, just kind of want some opinions. Like, is there any one of those data points you would lean towards more than others before we say no, this one's not for us? Um,
Yeah. So, the first thing I would do is market rent study is fantastic. It's what we used at my private equity shop to kind of hone in on what fair market rent was. And it is incredibly intense and a good way to kind of get a broad view of the market. I would say that it's not always as reliable for non-institutional type deals. So you might want to just look at, for instance, especially if you're not going to be doing all-in payment type structures, right? So for those of us who are utilizing, let's say, Zippy or 21st Mortgage or Triad to finance these homes, and they're charging us between an 8 and 12% interest rate, us or the actual tenant buyer, then that all-in payment becomes much more important, right? So like at some point you can't charge a lot rent of $800 even if the market would bear it, because the payment that they need to make on a brand new home that is financed is something like 600. So now all of a sudden they're at $1,400 a month, which is no longer affordable. So that's where we like the market rent study really kind of dials in the importance of taking into account the entire monthly payment that these residents are going to be making. In our case, a lot of the times, I don't know have the context for like what type of park you're looking at. If it's a five-star community, you could bring in new homes, maybe that would be more important. It doesn't sound like it from the sound of the lot rent, but with that said, if you just look at a portion of that market study, which is like the Zillow comps, the RentCast comps, and you do, let's say, a amalgamation or an average of all of those different comps from different sources for both 2 and 3 bedrooms, and you come to like something in between a 2 and 3 bedroom, leaning more towards 2 bedroom, especially like knowing the makeup of the homes that you have, then you can sort of understand, I would say, from a whole holistic standpoint, what you can charge in rent. So if there were $1,000 in 2 bedroom, 1 bath, 2 bedroom, 2 baths in the local area, then you could reasonably charge 500 likely for a mobile home. And so that's what I would lean towards in your case. And I'd be interested to see if someone, I don't know Kentucky at all. I don't know the market, but I'd be interested to see if someone could get a 2 bedroom or a 3 bedroom for $1,000 or less anywhere at this point. So what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, that's a good point. Is to just look directly at some apartment rents. Um, this park is it's there's no vacancies. Um, it's 100%, so it's 100% filled. There's some rent to owns in there. Everything else is tenant owned. I think it's interesting that it's has 100% occupancy. The other park that I called that's that's 260 a month, so even less. There's a really nice park. Um, that's also 100% occupancy. So I don't know. I kind of feel like I'd like to, you know, I feel like you kind of have to push it a little bit, right, to see if anybody moves out if you as you raise rents. But everything else out around there is low rent and 100% filled. So that tells me
There's
there might be some room, right?
It, it's a very rural area too. It's near the West Virginia border, so there's not a whole lot going on around there.
okay. Yeah. So that becomes a little bit more difficult when you're talking about lease up if you lose residents. But, if you're looking at neighboring parks and they're at 100% occupancy at 230, then they're doing something wrong, right? Especially in a state where you don't have rent control. They're probably they probably have a low basis, right? And they don't care. Unless it's an institutionally run asset and they're looking to sell and they're looking towards the sale, right? Like great example is my parents. They have, or not my parents, because now my parents are starting to take management and take over management and looking to sell because the estate's coming into their hands alongside two or three other sisters. But this is a classic story, right? The original landlord bought it for $100,000, and so to them, it doesn't matter if they collect $230 a month times 100 lots or if they collect $500 a month times 100 lots. So the market therefore hasn't pushed those rents to where they need to be because there's no urgency on behalf of the existing, uh, you know, of the existing owners. And that was the story of my grandparents, right? So that's kind of what you might encounter here. You have 100% occupancy, so there's obviously demand for the affordable housing, and it's not likely that you lose tenants to pick up their homes and move them to those other locations because there's nowhere to put those homes. So therefore, I think market could probably push in this case from what I've heard alone. So with that in mind, I would say push forward and see whether or not you can run a test ad, right? Test ad's probably the most important indicator of if you're actually going to be able to achieve that rent. And if you can't, then you just move on, right? But that's the easiest way to do it. Run it for 1 to 2 weeks, see how many hits you get, and then see how many of those hits actually seem serious, right? You don't have to take them to have to take them through the leasing process, but
Right.
it's going to be important to see how many hits you actually get. In rural markets, it'll tend to be less, but the fact that you have continued interest at say an all-in rent of 800, so you would run it as if it's a POH, right? And then you'd cut in half. When you cut that in half, it would be your lot rent. So if you were going to have $500 as your market lot rent, run it at $1,000 rental and see if there's interest. And then you could always turn it into a rent to own slash lease with option to purchase. If it's a rent more of a rentals market, but you want to push home ownership onto the tenants, or you might find that it's more of a renter's market. So like when you look at those fully occupied properties, is it mostly rentals or is it mostly tenant owned homes? And if it's the latter, then be you can be pretty sure that it's not a renter's market and that you would be able to sell those homes, even if at a low, at cost basis. So that's what I would say. What did you mention what your occupancy is right now?
It's at 100% right now, and interestingly, it has 11. tenant-owned homes, 3 park-owned homes, and the rest are all on rent-to-own deals already.
Okay. Great. So you're going to inherit some rent to owns. That's not always great. You need to make sure that you're modeling when those rent owns drop off because you can't account for that income after maybe year one, potentially, right? So take a look at those contracts. But some of those POHs you can maybe turn into, especially like if the lot rent plus the home rent is like $600, but you say, hey, I'll give you the home for $500 down payment, and you can just continue to pay your $600 a month. Now you've taken that person to a lot rent of $600, and they're just paying the same as they were for the rental. So that's a good way to kind of turn a tenant-owned home into a park-owned home into a tenant-owned home quickly, and then just ensuring that those rent to owns are kind of okay with you pushing rent over the course of the next 2 years, or however many years is left in the rent own contract to kind of approximate what their total payment is now, because that will be a massive drop off potentially depending on what the rent own payment is in your revenue when you take over the park. So keep those things in mind, model those things accurately, and uh, and that should be good. One second, someone's knocking on my door. Grocery delivery. Sorry. So yeah, does that sort of make sense? Any other questions there?
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. It's also in an opportunity zone. Have you had an experience with that?
It's not, I mean, listen, like unless you're like 1031ing into the opportunity zone, it's not necessarily that attractive in my opinion. And frankly, I'm not like 100% sure of the ins and outs. I know that there's future tax benefits. Like you don't have to pay taxes on the capital gains, or it's a lower taxable gain in the eyes of the IRS or something like that. It's not, I would be less concerned with like taxable benefits than I would that the deal works as is. And that's something Ryan will preach till he's blue in the face. Same thing with financing, right? It's like you can look at a deal in two different ways. You can look at it at $1 million at 1% seller financing, and then at the end of the 5 year term when the balloon is due and you have to refi, the appraisal comes back at 600,000, and you kind of screwed yourself, but it worked. The cash flow worked, right? With the seller financing. It's kind of similar in that regard with opportunity zones or like any taxable benefits. They should be ancillary and not like something you're focused on necessarily in the underwriting. Now, I don't want to overstate that too much. I think it's in, like the taxable benefits of a mobile home park in general are really important and should potentially be part of your underwriting as a GP, especially if you're now a real estate professional and you're able to take a massive amount of depreciation right off the bat, and all of a sudden, all of your active gains become a $0 tax liability. Yeah, like if you were supposed to pay $200,000 in taxes in 2025 and you're paying zero, add that to your investment cash flows and it'll look really nice. But ultimately, you want to make sure that the deal works as a standalone deal before you're kind of taking in those taxable benefits into the equation as well. And what that looks like to me is like if it's a value add, you're getting to at least 15% cash on cash returns post stabilization, and 20 plus percent IRR if it's a real heavy lift, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I think we're also wondering on the other end of that, like an opportunity zone, does that spell out a really distressed, challenging market that is just not a good idea?
Yes and no, right? Like,
Wow.
you could look at, it really depends on the market. It's market specific. When I worked at Brookfield, I worked on the Opportunity Zone Fund, and we deployed a ton of capital into multifamily and opportunity zones in New York City. One of those was Greenpoint, Brooklyn. Um, that is like the new Williamsburg. And if you know anything about New York City, Williamsburg is like the hub of like finance bros who moved out of Chelsea and West Village and want to live in Brooklyn, right? So a lot of money there now. And that's become Greenpoint effectively. Like there's been a spillover. So within like 5 years, you saw that opportunity zone turn into something that was no longer, a place where they wanted to gentrify. So they gave people taxable benefits. So it really depends on how adjacent you are to a potentially fantastic market. I can't say with any certainty about this one, but it sounds rural. So, I'd be leaning more towards your assumption than mine, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does. No, it's not close to anything fantastic.
Yeah.
It's in
So,
the hills and hollers.
yeah. So yeah, I think you kind of know that in your gut. How many sites was it?
21,
22. Yep.
or yeah, the
Okay.
the the 21st one is a vacant RV site,
Okay.
or 22nd one rather.
I would, so like when we look at market demographic, when we look at markets and we determine whether they're primary, tertiary, or primary, secondary, or tertiary, if you're looking at these tertiary markets, your cash flow better be really good. And if it's not, then I would maybe not look at it more closely. And the reason is because you're likely not going to experience the appreciation that you would in a primary market, right? So you need to, understand your buy box. And if your buy box is like heavy cash flow, because maybe right now you're trying to leave a W-2 or, just accumulate cash flow to help buoy your other, more primary market projects. Just understand that in the long term, you're probably not going to see massive appreciation. So whatever cap rate you're buying it at, you can basically plug that into the model as your exit cap rate with minor cap rate compression, like maybe 100 bips tops, and like for when it's fully stabilized. Now, of course, you start buying that other massive, beautiful property nearby, and you start raising rents there, right? It's forced appreciation through rent increases and forced cap rate compression through portfolio building. Then, yeah, I would assume a lower cap rate based on your portfolio premium. But outside of that, you're probably not going to, for a 21 site park, the nature of those assets are that they don't appreciate massively. So you're going to have to drive forced appreciation through rent increases or reduction of expenses, et cetera. So just kind of like building your NOI and then selling it at the same cap rate 5 years from now, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Henry, did we miss anything?
The floodplain
Mm,
is, I think it's potentially in a floodplain because it's in a mountainous area where there could be runoff and things like that. Rick, you may have more to add on that than I do.
Yeah, I listened to a previous call and there was discussion about a floodplain, and nobody really took concern, but I kind of look at this and think, man, I am concerned because it seems, all I can think of is Asheville, to be honest with you.
yeah,
Like,
that's the first thing that comes to my mind too, especially after you said the elevation and it's like in a valley effectively.
yeah,
I don't listen. I don't claim to be an expert in insurance, nor do I claim to be an expert in floodplains. But what I would do is just talk to an insurance expert and kind of understand what that means from an underwriting standpoint for the insurance liability or the liability insurance, and then just bake that in. But you know, how much is it like 100-year floodplain, right? Like it really depends on how often this flooding occurs. I know that like if your mobile home park gets wiped off the face of the earth, like doesn't matter how much flood insurance you have, they're not going to pay for it effectively. So it is a concern. It is definitely a concern. So I wouldn't negate it, but well, I don't know what phase you guys are at. You can potentially get me up to speed because this might be the first one we've analyzed together. But if you're in phase one and you're trying to buy your first mobile home park,
Yep.
get to phase two as quickly as possible. And if that means, taking a little bit of extra risk and it's a 100-year floodplain, like it probably is never going to happen. But there's an occasional flood that takes out the entire valley. It's a consideration. I don't know. Like I can't give you any. It's really based on your risk tolerance. So nothing that you're saying to me points to me being very excited about this deal. Um, you know, Bad market, rural, no like local comps that indicate you can raise rents substantially. A market rent study that indicates that your current rents are kind of at market. And then you being like kind of the ship that or the tide that raises all ships. It's not going to be easy. And I'm not going to say that anything should be easy. Like this should be hard. You should be looking for deals that other people don't want, but there might be too many red flags here for you guys to pursue this one. But like that said, you know, I can't pretend to know what market it is. So, if you guys want to share a little bit more, like maybe we can pull up a map and see where it's at. I guess another good question is it like a throughway to any other major MSAs or even minor MSAs, like tertiary markets that, this could potentially be a stop, a throughway to? Like, for instance, my parks in Elmira are between Binghamton and Corning, and Ithaca is like right above it. So, that's a good boot. And then Scranton right below it in Pennsylvania. So it's kind of in the middle of those three markets. And while it's rural, it's also it's in the center of a large town. And the MSA is quite large. So it's, it's a tough calculus. Choosing markets is difficult. But if you are able to kind of have one of these rural hubs, as we call them, then it could be quite lucrative, especially as that part of the country gets built out. I don't know what migration looks like into Kentucky, if it's good or bad. If this was in North Carolina, the migration's insane. If it was Florida, the migration's insane. So, I'm looking at places in New York, like, there's quite an exodus. So, I have to be really careful about the markets I select. But if you're looking at a rural hub that is growing in population because of the local MSAs kind of growing as well and buoying that market, then it could be a good kind of urban pioneer option for you guys.
Yeah, I think we were getting less and less excited about it the more we learned about it. But we wanted to, as we did the market rent study, just wanted to talk through that with you here and maybe learn a little bit, take it as a learning experience. Um, and really that's more what we were after in this conversation more than anything. Because yeah, there's just kind of flags popping up, and I agree with everything that you're saying. It's pretty rural. It's not close to anything significant that's going to be popping off in the next couple years. So um, just diving into the rent study was what we were interested in doing, just learning about.
I agree. If you want to pop open the rent study right now, we can look at it together. But it sounds like you guys kind of have your heads wrapped around it. And I agree, like every deal you do, whether it goes under contract or not, you're going to learn a ton through that process. So no time wasted, there's no time wasted underwriting deals or doing diligence. It just, it hurts your heart a little bit when you've done it all and then it goes away. It's just part of the game. So yeah, happy to dive in a little bit. We are kind of hitting the 5:30 mark, and I do want to take on someone else's deal, but we can do 5 minutes on your rent market study if you want.
No, that's okay. It was pretty straightforward walking through that. I just watched you do it once, and it was pretty straightforward. So yeah, I think we're set. Appreciate all the feedback and conversation.
Absolutely.
We want to move on.
Well, I'm happy to help, guys, and it sounds like you're doing all the right things and thinking all the right things. So the next one, I'm sure, or the following one will be a hit. Looking forward to hearing about it.
I
Yeah.
appreciate your advice. I'm gonna hop off. I got to pick my kids up, but thank you so much. This is really helpful.
Absolutely. Thanks, Henry.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Anybody else on the call have anything they want to bring to the group? I know Melissa, you said yesterday you had a deal you wanted to review. Happy to go through that. Harrison, this might be your first call. I don't know if you have a deal ready to go, but whoever wants to jump in, happy to take a look. Yeah, go ahead, Melissa.
Hey Michael, how are you?
Good. How's it going?
Good, thanks. So yeah, I do have a deal that I want to look at. I put it in the folder if you want to go ahead and open that up.
Ah, you're the best. You know exactly what to do now. I love it. All right, let me take a look at the folder.
It's called Atkinson Estates. I don't know if that put estates, but it's Atkinson.
I'm just popping it up right now. I see Atkinson.
Yeah,
Looks like you got the 5 minute deal evaluator. Perfect. I'm opening that now and then I will share my screen.
great.
Okay, let's dive in. So you did the 5 minute, the 3 minute, or the 1 minute?
I was working on the five yesterday, and the purchase price in there is not the actual purchase price. I was just playing with the numbers, but it's going for 900.
Okay. Okay, so all of these inputs I assume are correct, but I will walk through them just in case.
Yes.
430 lot rent. This is from HUD.
Well, so the HUD was a lot higher, but then the on the OM, he put that the market rent was at 400, so I just put it a little bit higher.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine. It's a good assumption for now.
Yeah.
And what state is this in?
This is in Illinois.
Okay.
It's in Henry County, and it's 2 hours from where I'm at.
I like that. I like the 2 hour drive. I see 24 lots. That's good.
Yeah, it's 24 lots. 22 are occupied, I believe.
I see 20 here. I can zoom in if this is hard for everyone to see as well. So
Let me double check here.
I also see you provided an OM, so I can pop that open as well.
Yeah, I've got it open. I'm just double checking everything. Yeah, so 20 are occupied and one is a rent to own at 700 a month. So this is where I like get stuck because the tenant owned homes, like we know what that is, but then when it comes in and then there's like a rent to own and then a mix of park owned homes, I kind of just took the average. So it's not totally accurate.
That's fine. And listen, like that's the way to do it with these 5 minute deal evaluators when you're looking at rent owns. By the way, this looks like a beautiful park.
Yeah, it looks nice, and like from the surface, it looks all good. So I'm like, why has it been on the market for so long? Like, what's wrong with it?
This looks like a school maybe nearby. Um,
Yeah, that's some kind of like a stadium or something. I was looking at the Google
okay.
overview earlier.
This might be a lagoon.
Well, it's on city sewer and water.
Okay, perfect. That's
Yeah.
good to know. So that's not a lagoon. That's just a little stream or a little creek. All right, so that's perfect. I kind of figured it would be on city water and sewer just because its proximity to what looks like a downtown-esque area. Fantastic. 2 hours away. Fantastic. It looks like it's in pretty good shape, in my
Yeah,
opinion.
doesn't look bad.
Good signage. Looks like it might have been managed by a manager who actually cares, which is nice.
Hmm.
The homes are a good size. I see some double wides and I see good length on the homes as well as width. These look like 14 to 16, probably 16 wide, which is nice. And I just want to see price per unit 37,500. Okay. Let's go into this calculator here. And you're spent, yep, 37, and then per physically occupied lot. It's, well, that's interesting because we're saying, okay, so he's saying it's 37 per lot, which means he's actually valuing it at the 100x rule,
Yeah.
which is interesting. I don't know if he did that on purpose or if it just came to that number, but we look at things from a physically occupied standpoint, which is why it's a little bit of an inflated price. This
Mhm.
isn't that much of a differential that it would scare me away, but we'll look to kind of get it a little lower, I would say. I don't know, like, is this a super rural market?
I mean, it's pretty close to other major cities, so it's not too bad. Like I said, it's 2 hours from Chicago, uh, not too far from like Davenport, Iowa, Rock Island, Illinois, Peoria, Illinois. So it's rural, but it's close enough to other MSAs.
Yeah, so it sounds like what we were kind of talking about earlier, a rural hub, which is always a good indication of growth.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is a really significant downtown. I love this when I see a mobile home park. I love
Mhm.
looking at it and seeing like these single family home developments nearby. It looks like there's some factories nearby where people potentially work. There's also some farming industry in the area. So this was what I would classify kind of as a rural hub. And if I scroll out a bit and I kind of look at the surrounding area, I'm just looking for other major MSAs or even secondary or tertiary MSAs. Geneseo nearby. This looks like a sizable downtown.
Yeah.
Um, what else we got? I'm just continuing to go out a little bit here. I don't know Illinois very well, so just let me get my bearings. Sheffield. Oh, this is Route 80. Okay. That's fantastic. Route 80 is like an incredible interstate that goes, like, if you follow this, you go straight to New York. So that gives me a lot of positive vibes just because, truckers, et cetera, they can kind of stop here. It's like on one of the major arteries of the United States, is what I would say. So that's good. And while it is a little bit rural, like if you look at the surrounding area, I think this could potentially kind of qualify as a rural hub, especially given its proximity to you, Chicago, and some of
Mhm.
these other secondary and tertiary MSAs. So I like it in terms of its location and just like its submarket. Now we'll just jump in here. That's just like I always like to kind of get a gut feel using the map. Like what is around this? Um, could this potentially be a place where there's development or people, putting down roots? And if that's the case, great. And especially if it's close to other kind of towns with factories, et cetera. And it's a short drive from from those factories, from those places of work to those people's homes and this community. That's a really good sign. So I like it. Let's kind of dive into the metrics. We've looked at the qualitative stuff. Let's look at the quantitative stuff. So lot rent 375 right now. You said top end of market's 430. That's not a huge gap. We're seeing a 15% mark to market.
Yeah.
That means that it's only 15% away from market. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but let's just continue here. Your total rent is 800. So I'm assuming that this is the average of the rent to owns and the POHs.
Yeah, so they've got one rent to own at 700, and then it looks like there's two park owned homes. One is 570 and the other one's 895.
Okay. Did you do, here, let me just take this real quick and I'll run it through ChatGPT while we continue to work here. And I'm
Um,
gonna end up creating a foolproof prompt for ChatGPT to do this so that you guys can just kind of pop this in there. All right, we'll let it kind of work in the background there while we go through the rest of this, assuming that 800 is correct, and then we'll do a little bit more of a deep dive on that site occupancy a little bit later or that rent roll. So 17.3, this is where you should kind of put the rent to owns and the um, park owned homes. Is that correct? There's
Yeah,
three of those
that's what I
total.
did. Yeah.
Okay, 20 and then four vacant lots. That's good. Okay, so assuming that you kind of get these stabilized, you can then start whittling away at these vacant lots by either bringing in used homes or, maybe if the market allows, you can bring in some new homes. We can look at that later. Total expenses 26,000. Is that directly from the OM?
Yeah, this is from the ON. He gave me the P&L. So I just took it from that.
Perfect. Okay, are they recovering any expenses right now?
Um, Let me see. I don't think so. So the park pays a fixed trash, water, and sewer
Okay.
every month.
It's fixed as in like every single month it's the exact same amount.
Yeah, so I asked the broker about that, and he said that I guess in 22, the tenants were not paying their bills, so then the city got upset with them and then took that back and then gave them just one meter and negotiated with the owner to just have a flat rate every single month. And then I asked him if that would transfer to the new owner, and he said it's a verbal agreement that yes, it would transfer.
Okay. Yeah, you just want to get that in writing before you close, but that's
Yeah.
great. This way, you have a fixed bill that you can then charge back to your tenants likely, assuming that the Illinois law allows you to do so.
Yeah, I had
So
never heard of like trash water sewer being fixed. So have you guys had experience with that? Like, wouldn't it eventually go up?
I've seen sewer fixed. I haven't personally seen water fixed before. But, in one of the parks I'm looking at in Pennsylvania, there was like a fixed $85 per site. And that was just something in our business plan we were going to bill back to the tenants day one. So it's possible, right? You could do that. And then you could, in that verbal agreement, which it needs to become an actual agreement so that you have some kind of recourse if they were to argue it later, you would basically state this is going to be the rate for 1 year or 5 years. Obviously, you would, in the initial agreement you draft, make it as long as humanly possible and wait for them to push back.
Right.
And then, you could argue that it should increase like 3% annually or something like that, to kind of match inflation. You could even have it match the CPI, meaning the consumer price index, so that
Mhm.
it can move upward with, inflation every year. And then you can just bill that back to the tenant on that inflationary amount every year. And within your lease, you can state that, that you give to your tenants, like, hey, we're going to bill this back. This is adjusted based on inflation. So every year, depending on how much the water bill goes up from the town, you'll receive that increase in your water bill on the 1st of January or something like that.
Yeah, got it.
And then, at some point, they might say, we're not going to do this anymore. We're going to charge you on a per unit basis. And at that point, you go in sub meter, which is pretty inexpensive. So, we can cross that bridge when we get there. But so what
Yeah.
I'm seeing here is 975, 700. This is a vacant home. So we'll leave that as is. Was this December 2024? They don't have 2025 metrics at all.
No, I didn't get that. No.
Okay, no worries. That's fine. So we'll just use, what is this rent per lot here? This might be the most recent.
It says 23 on the
Oh,
top.
yeah, it does. You're right. Okay, so we'll come back here. Let's just do an average of these, not including the vacant home. So that's interesting. So I guess this one has been leased and that's why you have three in there. Or is there one that I'm missing? Is it this one? Okay, now I see it. So the average of those is 748, and I think you had 800, which is fine. It might have gone up a bit. And if we look at this table, download the CSV. This happens every time. There we go. So this is the one that's in the OM. And now I'm seeing that out. Is that that? Yeah, that. Oh, that's market. So 895, 700, and 570. Yeah. So I don't know. How'd you come to 800? Unless this is incorrect.
I don't think I put
895,
that in
700,
there.
570. It might have been that you were using market, but in any case, I'll just move this over here to 721.
Okay.
Okay, and so now let's go through the rest of this. We have 26,000 in expenses. It looks like you can bill back some of it, so we'll put that down here in the expense recovery upon stabilization. I just want to take a look at the P&L real quick again and just take a look at those expenses. So electrical amenities, recycling, landscaping, trash, water, city water, sewer, trash. So this is all three.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Equals this divided by 24 lots. So about 55 a lot or 13,200. All right, let's go back here and we'll put in 1,400. I just want to see what it looks like when we put it right here. What was it?
Where are you now? Hold on.
1320, 1320 times 12. Okay, so about $15,000 a year, you're going to get an expense reimbursement, which we can bring this up a bit. 20. Well, let's see what your expense ratio is first. 30%. So your expenses are 31,000, which is right around what your expenses are now. So we can still jack that up a bit. Let's call it 35 and even more 40% expense recovery and even more 50% expense recovery. Okay, perfect. So now we're closer to what your expense reimbursement might look like when you stabilize, which means you're going to bill back those expenses. But since that doesn't exist day one, I'm going to leave it out of here.
Mhm.
Going back to your expense P&L here, if we do the sum of these, 27,000, which I think is what you have. Yep, perfect. Okay, so we have an approximation of what income and expenses look like. And so I think we can now kind of walk through the rest of this. LTV is 70, interest rate of 7, 20-year AM, 0 IO. I think that's conservative. I like it. You are above your debt service coverage ratio of 1, so that's okay, but it's not necessarily what a bank is going to love to see. Now, when we talk about these rural markets, there might be credit unions or local banks that'll lend on all of your home rent as well. So now you're at a 129 DSCR, which is above like a 125, which I like to see as safe. And I would say that a bank would potentially lend on all of this revenue, especially if you're going to a local credit union. That's going to be something that you have to do some diligence on ahead of time, get it under contract, and then immediately start that diligence to understand like if you can finance this thing at this price.
Yeah, okay.
But, worst case scenario, they say, well, we can't do it on the home rent. And then you go back to seller and say, well, actually, I can only pay 700 because I can't get financing. Or I think let's take a look here.
Yeah, I wanted to go in at 700.
Yeah, I know. And that would be a hell of a deal too, because now you're going to cash flow. Let's see, at 700,000.
Yeah.
Day one, you're cash flowing at
Mhm.
13% and 8% on just lot rent. So I think this is like your oh my God number. And then 800 is your UG number, or
Mhm.
sorry, your okay number. And then 900,000 is like your okay, I'll do it, but I'm not super happy about it. So
Yeah.
with that, that's just based on our initial day one underwriting though. So we have to look also at our stabilization inputs and see the meat on the bone for this deal and determine whether or not it's the juice is worth the squeeze here. So let's come down here now instead. I see you only have 18 lots. So I think I think that's probably a good assumption, like, that you're not going to lease up the rest of these, but you have 24 total. So you are missing two here. So I would say all of these, this becomes 20 at stabilization. And then you have the four vacant. So that's 24 on both the site occupancy status at stabilization and at initial underwriting, which we want to see. We want to make sure that both of these match. And then we move on. So 492 a lot rent. Um, that's just a little bit above your market lot rent that we said would grow at 3% over the hold period over 3 years. That's fine. Maybe you could be a little bit more conservative here and say 470. And then, we'll go into our expense ratio, which it's currently 25. You conservatively underwrote a higher expense ratio, which I think is fine, honestly. 30% achieved expense ratio in a park like this, which is a little bit more rural. You might have less options when it comes to vendors. I think that's fine. I think that's a good conservative underwriting. Now let's look at your stabilization inputs. So if you were to accomplish this, which means you're going to you're going to increase rents $32 per year for 3 years. That's very achievable, and I think that's very fair. You're going to turn these three homes into tenant-owned homes. So you're not going to have any park-owned home revenue any longer. At the end of that business plan, you would achieve an 11.8% cash on cash return, so a 12% cash on cash return, and a cap rate of about 10.7. If you were to then go and sell at a 7 cap, which you probably won't be able to achieve in a rural market like this, so I would assume a 10 cap, although you are paying a 7 cap on lot rent alone right now. So maybe we pop in a 7 cap just to approximate it. We can say that you're creating $469,000 worth of equity upon sale. So you're going to sell that property at about 1.36, 1.37, and you're going to earn $469,000 when you go and sell that property. So in terms of like appreciation, it looks pretty good. So I'm sure if we pop this into the 10-minute pro forma, we would see some significant IRR. So that's your annualized return. This doesn't make me like jump out of my seat and say this is awesome, like 12% cash on cash return. However, when you bake in some potential appreciation on the park because you stabilize it, you build back utilities, I think that this is a good first deal, especially given the high concentration of tenant-owned homes, city water and sewer, in what potentially looks like a good market, a good submarket along Route 80. This to me screams perfect first deal. It'll help you get your feet under you. It'll help you set up your operations. You'll have to raise $315,000, it looks like. But this stuff, your closing cost 5,000, that's probably accurate, maybe between 5 and 10. Your year one capex 10,000. It's good to have some reserves just in case something breaks, so I think that's fair. Your holding period capex of 30,000. Yeah, maybe you need to turn these homes into tenant-owned homes, but I think one of them or two of them are rent-owned, so that's not even on you. They're just going to immediately turn into tenant-owned homes. And so maybe you have to spend, let's say, between 5 and 10,000 to turn that home into a tenant-owned home through refurb. Great. I think that this is a conservative estimate. I would raise 315 or try and find it through friends and family or use your own cash for that if you could. I think this is a good first deal. I really do. But I would think it's even better if you get them down to 700. So I would recommend you getting a feel for what the current, environment is, if there's a lot of offers on this. And
Yeah,
if
I tried to ask the broker that, but he wouldn't give me the answer.
yeah, sometimes they're sticklers. And a lot of the times they will tell you if it's the latter, if there are a lot of or there is a lot of traction because they're trying to push up the price. And if they
Yeah.
don't say anything, it also says a lot because it could be that there's not a lot of traction. And you've said yourself that it's been on the market for quite some time.
Right.
So,
So I'm like, what's wrong with it?
right. So we won't know unless we do like significant diligence, and you won't be able to do that diligence unless you have the park under contract.
Right.
So my suggestion would be to send an LOI at 700 and see what they say. It's not like you're under the gun right now because it doesn't sound like there's a ton of people clamoring to get this deal. So send the $700,000 LOI, see what they say. If they say absolutely not, okay, say counter. And
Hmm.
then when they counter at 800, you're like, okay, that's a better deal, right? Because now we're looking at 800,000. So 40,000, that's 40,000 per occupied lot, a lot closer to that 100x rule. And now you're going to be at a 15% cash on cash return, which is a lot more attractive.
Yeah, okay, that was my plan to go in at 700. I didn't know if that was going to be ridiculous or what, but
It might be, and they might laugh, but one of the things that I've noticed recently in the market is that a lot of these brokers are pricing for it to not move. They just kind of want to anchor a price in your head and
mhm.
make you feel like you're like totally underbidding, so you overbid. And so I would just go in at 7 and see what they say. The seller might be adamant that he wants 900 or he's not going to move, and there's nothing you can do about that, right? All you can do is give the offer. And a lot of the times, if you're the first person to the table and you give them a $700 offer, $700,000 offer, and it's been on the market for a month or less than a month, 10 days, and the seller still is too big for his britches, and he's got all this optimism, then that might fall on deaf ears. But if it's been on the market 6 months and they haven't been able to move it, all of a sudden $700,000 seems to be pretty attractive. And if you're the fourth person to say that and the others have gone away, well, now you're the clear option. So I would just go ahead and send that offer. It never hurts to send an offer, right? And if
Yeah,
if they say no, then they say no. Then you try again and you see how far you can push it. But I think you did a good job underwriting this one. You got to the right price before, Ivan did here. Just make sure you're drilling into your stabilized inputs as well so you can see what the end game is. Because
mhm.
it's all well and good that this cash flows, at the outset, but is it worth your time in the long run? And that's the answer that the stabilization inputs gives you.
Got it. Yeah,
All right. I think you did a great job with this one. You're getting much better at underwriting and you're doing this much more quickly. So that's really good to see.
I'm trying. Thank
No,
you.
you're killing it. Absolutely. All right. Thanks, Melissa. I want to see the LOI written by tomorrow. Okay. It's not hard. Just use
I
the
have it
simple.
drafted. I have it drafted, so
Oh,
I'll send
beautiful. Okay. That's good to
it.
hear. All right. All right. Send it off to John either tonight or tomorrow. Because it's still like 3 o'clock by you, right?
Oh, it's 5 now, so yeah.
Okay. Great. All right. So good luck.
Cool. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. All right, who else is on the call that wants to present a deal? I know we actually only have 5 minutes, so I don't think we have enough time to go through it, but I'm happy to kind of just field some questions before we close. Does anyone have any general questions they want to go through? All right, well then, Harrison, I'm gonna call you out right now. I'm gonna say hello, make you introduce yourself to the group on this call, and give everybody a little bit of background about yourself. I know there's only 2 people on this call. There might be more watching the live stream on YouTube, and there might be more who watch this later. So just kind of give a little shout out to yourself and tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, I just got into the mobile home park, community, the industry. I was doing institutional retail real estate for a few years and, got exposed to mobile home parks through a family member that actually lives at one. And I thought, wow, these have got to be a great opportunity in terms of just cash flow and a stable investment. And the more research I did, I just kind of got drawn into it more and more. It's been about 3.5 months now that I've been looking for deals full time. I'm currently searching for deals in the Carolinas. I'm based in Charlotte myself, and hoping to close my first deal soon. Ideally before the new year, but just grinding away, trying to underwrite everything that I can. Really,
I love to hear that. And I'm sure you will. If you put your mind to it, you got 3 months left. I think it'd be very difficult to get it done before the end of the year,
right?
unless you find like a seller that wants to move fast and you feel comfortable, getting diligence done that quickly. But nothing's impossible, right? I think our first deal we closed in 45 days. But there was like some time leading up to that to get the contract written and kind of come to terms. So it's not impossible. Keep in mind, people do slow down around Thanksgiving. So things come to a halt is in terms of deal flow for the most part. But then all those deals that were like kind of in the funnel right before Thanksgiving, they just go full speed January 1st. So
Yeah.
January 2nd. So definitely keep pumping those lines, call as many people as possible and get those deals in the pipeline. I know we talked previously and you've kind of built out your pipeline already, but I will tease something to everyone on this call. We are building out a product that is going to be extremely affordable, and that's what I'm most excited about. That will basically give people access to a CRM with with property records accessible that they can just start dialing from. And so I'm excited to launch that hopefully in the next couple months, and then offer it to our students, which is going to solve the deal flow problem for a lot of people. So, make sure you go through the broker list that we have, which is in the 30-day mobile home park course in the leads section, and then kind of DM, not DM, send an email to all those email addresses with the markets that you're in and that you're looking for. And then on top of that, ensure because that'll fill your deal pipeline from an on market standpoint, on market, off market. Sorry, on market, pre market, I should say, because a lot of these brokers decide that they don't want to go to market with these deals and they'd prefer to just kind of stay within a specified number of serious buyers. And then for your off market pipeline, hopefully you've started to build that yourself. And then in the near future, hopefully we can help you build it too. So, really excited for that announcement. And I will talk to you guys soon. Have a great rest of your night and thanks for joining.